I genuinely believe that this is the only video on LinkedIn growth you'll ever need to watch for one simple reason. I'm not holding anything back. I'll be walking you through the exact LinkedIn content strategy that's responsible for this founder going from barely getting any views at all to growing to over 30,000 followers and getting millions of impressions every single month. I've used this same strategy myself to grow my account to over 40,000 followers and build my agency to over 7 figures in revenue. This growth strategy proves itself time and time again, even if you're a beginner. If you actually follow this and implement it, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to see growth that you never thought possible on LinkedIn. But before we get into this, I do have to warn you, because I'm packing so much value into this video, it's naturally going to be a little bit longer. So if you're not that serious about growing on LinkedIn right now, you just can't devote the time or attention to it, it's okay. Just bookmark this video to come back to later, because this is going to be insanely valuable for you. Let's jump into it. Now, the first thing we got to figure out, right, is why LinkedIn in 2025? Why is it the most obvious platform to use for B2B content marketing? And there are two reasons for this. One is platform audience fit. When you're picking marketing channels, you want to be posting content where your target audience is hanging out. And if you're selling into founders and CEOs, C-suite leadership, or really any sort of professional, you're selling a B2B product, LinkedIn is a no-brainer because people in those categories are using the platform and they're in the right headspace to be consuming content about your product. So for example, if you're using Instagram or TikTok after work, you're just trying to turn your brain off, be distracted, entertain yourself, you're not really going to be considering your next software purchase or which agency you're going to partner with next. Whereas on LinkedIn, people are actively looking at content through this lens. They're open almost to being sold to. You don't want to be overly salesy. We'll get into that later, but they're at least in the right mind space to consume content that's going to move them closer to being a buyer for your company. The second thing to consider here is the effort to reward ratio. Again, your audience might be on TikTok. They might be on Instagram, even if you're selling into CMOs or CEOs. I mean, I'm a CEO. I use Instagram all the time. After work, I go on Instagram Reels and just scroll and scroll and scroll. But like I just said, I'm not really considering my next software purchase or my next agency partnership as I'm looking at brain rot. So to take me out of that mental state of I'm just trying to be entertained and sell me something, it takes a lot of effort. That content has to be really high quality or really compelling. Whereas on LinkedIn, I already know what I'm getting into. I'm in that right mind state. So it's just easier to reach that target audience with less effort on your end. So my point is, if LinkedIn is sitting here and it's a very easy, direct platform to reach a B2B audience on, why would you put all this unnecessary time and effort in trying to crack other channels that might have a chance at working, but your audience may or may not be on there? You get to do all these crazy strategies versus just consistently posting thought leadership content on LinkedIn. I think the choice is obvious. There's also been a stat thrown around that only 1% of LinkedIn users are actually posting content, so the platform is starved for content. That stat's about 2 or 3 years old. I do still think there's some truth to it. I don't know what the exact number is today in 2025, but there's still a massive discrepancy between the amount of people posting content and the total audience on LinkedIn. I will say though, that percentage is definitely getting larger. Just speaking anecdotally, I talk to at least 5 founders every single week who are interested in posting content on LinkedIn. It's becoming more of a default thing where you raise money or you start a company and I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn. It's no longer something I'm having to convince people to do. So it's kind of a sign that it might become saturated or more difficult to stand out in the next year or two. So if you're considering posting content on LinkedIn, right now we're still in a golden age for it, but you want to get on it quickly. And I need to make something very clear here. When I say post on LinkedIn, I don't mean posting from your company page. So posting from corporate accounts as of now is kind of dead. You should do it a little bit. So maybe once a week or once every other week, just to keep the corporate page alive. But today in 2025 and going forward, you're not going to build an audience using a corporate page. People just don't want to follow them. Think about your own behavior on social media, whether you're using LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, as you are right now. Think about what content you consume. A lot of times it's from individuals. You're watching my content right now, not Compound Content Studio's YouTube channel. The same thing applies on LinkedIn. People want to follow people. So when you start posting on LinkedIn, you're going to post from your personal page as the founder, or if you're trying to convince your founder to post, you're going to get them to post on their personal page because it's going to go such a long way. The corporate page can, again, be useful, but you want to treat that more like a landing page than as a way to build an audience. So when people see your content through your personal page using all the strategies we're going to discuss later in this video that I've used with a bunch of founders, they're going to get interested and they're eventually going to head over to that company page. And all you need to make sure you do on there is keep it kind of active, have a few case studies, make it clear what your company and product does. That way, when they land on that company page, it's very obvious to them, like, okay, I'm going to take the next step and book a demo. But you're not going to get new people by posting content from your corporate page. In most cases, there may be edge cases or exceptions to that, but as it stands, it's very few and far between the amount of corporate pages that see any sort of momentum on LinkedIn. Founder-led content is the present and definitely the future. Now, how do you make sure your content in your account is set up to perform as well as possible so you can grow an audience and get more leads predictably? So there's a few different components here. The first is you want to answer the golden question. So what's the one reason why someone in your target audience would follow you on LinkedIn? If you cannot clearly articulate that in one sentence, you have work to do. A lot of times when I talk to founders who want to start posting on LinkedIn or have been posting but aren't seeing results, their content's confusing. There's no clear reason why someone in their audience should follow them. And the answer here, to be clear, is not, hey, look at my product, it's so cool, you should follow me because my product is so cool. Nobody cares about your product, especially when you're first getting started. Unless you're building OpenAI, nobody cares. Instead, you want to figure out what value you can add to your audience that makes them want to follow you. You either want to add value or be entertaining. If you're doing neither, you're kind of worthless on the social timeline. I know it's harsh, but it's true. And kind of picking between value and entertainment on LinkedIn, in most cases, go for value. It's going to attract the highest quality audience. So answering that golden question, what value is the one reason why someone in your target audience is going to follow you on LinkedIn? So using myself as an example, I share how to build an audience on LinkedIn. So if you want to grow on LinkedIn and use it to get leads for your B2B company, you're going to follow me because I've done it with over 100 B2B founders over the past 2 years. Another hypothetical example, if you're selling into go-to-market leaders, you might want to position yourself as a resource for how to get better at go-to-market or how to avoid common go-to-market mistakes. If you're running a product that helps people send better cold emails, instead of saying, hey, here's this product and all these features that are going to help you send better cold emails, position it as, hey, I'm going to be a resource for you and give you tips and tricks and advice on how to get better at cold email and how to get more responses and how to book more meetings. Because then when you build that trust and people associate you with being a resource in this category, when they need your product or when they need a product in your category, you're going to be top of mind because you've been adding all this value over the course of the past several months or even years. The second part to account positioning here is when you're answering that golden question, you want to make sure your answer has good content market fit. Over the years, I've seen a few cases where founders will start posting on LinkedIn and get a good amount of momentum, but the audience they're attracting isn't actually the audience that will buy from them. I saw this play out with Adam Robinson a couple of years ago. Before he started posting on LinkedIn, I was actually the one who convinced him to start posting on LinkedIn. I remember the meeting I had with him after work one day. My boss at the time introduced me to him. He was like, hey, you got to talk to Adam. He's thinking about posting on LinkedIn. You got to convince him to start posting. So had that conversation. He started posting. And at the time, he was selling a product that was targeting direct-to-consumer founders. But the problem was Adam wasn't a direct-to-consumer founder. He's a software guy. So all the content that he was producing around direct-to-consumer marketing and email marketing, which is kind of the angle or the category in which his product sat, it wasn't really hitting because it wasn't coming from real experience and it was pretty generic. But we did find that when he talked about SaaS growth and building in public and sharing his process of building his company to $12 million in ARR at the time, and he was being very transparent about his numbers and all this sort of stuff, that content crushed. But it attracted SaaS founders. So he's trying to sell this product for direct-to-consumer founders, but the content that does well on LinkedIn for him is attracting all these software founders. There's a mismatch between his product and his audience. In Adam's case, what he did is he actually started an entirely different company, RB2B, which is the B2B version of retention.com. And that way, his software marketing, his SaaS building in public content was attracting the right audience for B2B. And he was able to take that company from $0 to $1 million in ARR in something like 16 weeks. It was insane. And now I think it's about $5 million in ARR. But the reason why that content works so much better now was because there was a clear alignment between content and the desired audience for the product. So content market fit. Another example here using myself is that I've been trying to recruit content writers for the past several months. So content has been a main driver of growth for my agency. I use it to attract leads. LinkedIn is the primary channel for me. YouTube is starting to get up there. Shout out to you guys. But LinkedIn is by far the main channel for marketing my agency. And it's been great for lead gen. But I was running into a problem because all my content was targeted towards founders, which was great for lead gen, but my main bottleneck in my business was recruiting. I needed to find writers to be able to hire. And I was thinking about this, how do I make it more obvious for writers to find me and want to work for my company? And I thought about it, I was like, oh, all this content I'm posting is geared towards founders. What if I test this out and mix in some more content for writers and content about how to write better and stuff like that? And what I found was as I layered that content in over 1, 2, 3 3 months, my recruiting pipeline picked up. So when you're evaluating whether or not you have content market fit, there's 3 things I want you to consider. 1, is this content relevant to my product? 2, is this content relevant to my target audience? Is it attracting the right people for that product? And 3, do I have inherent credibility and stories to be able to create compelling content in this category? If you're missing one of those 3 things, you likely don't have content market fit. And look, if I'm being completely honest, not every founder is going to have perfect content market fit. The ones that grow the fastest on LinkedIn typically do. Founders that don't necessarily have that, they can still grow, and LinkedIn is still the obvious choice as a marketing channel as a B2B founder, but it's just going to be a little bit of a slower burn. So be aware of who you're comparing yourself with. And this leads me into the last component of account positioning, which is inherent credibility. And I mentioned this a few seconds ago, but it deserves its own section here. A lot of times the founders you see perform really well on LinkedIn really quickly, like I was just mentioning, have that inherent credibility. Their audience already has a reason to trust them. Their content doesn't need to be as optimized. Their hooks don't need to be as on point for their audience to actually care about the content. So ideally, the company you're building and the content strategy you're going to adopt aligns with experience you already have. Ideally, you're not starting from scratch. If you are, you can still make it work, but again, it's going to be a slower burn. One fun story here that exemplifies the importance of credibility is about a year or so ago, I was working with a client in the fintech category, and the CEO said that he wanted his content to sound like Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. And I go to look at Dimon's content, and it's terrible, dude. There's just walls of text. It's not very compelling. There's a non-existent hook. The media selection is terrible. It's just very corporate HR coded. And I had to explain to this founder that, hey, I understand why you think you want to sound like Dimon because he's a CEO of this very prominent bank and you're in fintech and you want to seem legit. But what I'm going to tell you is his content's not optimized at all and nobody really knows who you are yet. So for you to get momentum on the platform, you've kind of got to play the algorithm game and make sure your hooks are on point, make sure you're choosing the right media, making sure your topics are a bit polarizing. Dimon has enough credibility over his decades of experience. He can post whatever and it's probably going to do pretty decently well. The more credibility you have, the less optimized your content needs to be. And a lot of times the founders who perform the best on LinkedIn and have the fastest growth have both credibility and good execution of best practices. It's not one or the other. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that I've got you convinced that LinkedIn is a relevant channel for you, you're posting from your founder's account, and you've got a good idea of account positioning and laying the foundation there, let's talk content strategy. So what types of content should you make? What should those look like? How often should you post? Everything you got to know to make sure your content is optimized for the LinkedIn algorithm. And what I want to do here is make sure you're getting enough eyeballs and converting those eyeballs into leads. And the first framework I want to introduce to you is the content funnel. And this is the way that I organize content with all of my clients and organize those topics to make sure, again, that we're optimizing for distribution, getting more impressions, but those impressions are high quality and establishing you as a thought leader in your category, and ultimately converting those eyeballs and impressions into leads and demos or emails, whatever that success metric is for you. And there's 3 stages of the content funnel: top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. And I will preface this by saying it's a little bit overly simplistic. Certain content can overlap and be slightly top of funnel and some middle of funnel, or a combination between bottom of funnel and middle of funnel, or bottom of funnel and top of funnel. It's not cut and dry, but it is helpful to have this framework to organize your topics with. Top of funnel topics are typically broader. They're meant to get more visibility and just keep the algorithm on your side. There's something to be said for just posting content that you know is going to get a lot of engagement or impressions. Even if it's not the most relevant to your product or even to your industry, you don't want to go too far in this direction because then you end up with a fluffy audience. But there is something to be said for playing the top of funnel attention game from time to time. So here's an example. This post from Austin talks about how in 2.5 years, since incorporating the Sealed Unify to 56 people, there's a lot he would do differently, so I have a little negativity bias there. If I had to start tomorrow, here are the 9 things I'd do again. So again, your classic founder learnings post with an image of him and his co-founder to add some authenticity to it. And these IRL photos tend to do quite well. I'll talk about that in the media section later, but this is a classic top of funnel piece of content, and it performed quite well, over 200 likes. But one of my points here is that this content isn't directly related to Unify. The product itself, but it does perform quite well on LinkedIn. Moving one step down in the funnel, middle of funnel content is your typical thought leadership content. So the purpose of middle of funnel content is to establish you as a go-to resource in your niche. And the good thing about middle of funnel content is that you can still build an audience with this. When you do it right and apply LinkedIn best practices, like making sure you're optimizing your hooks and using the right media and the correct formatting, this content will grow your audience, but it's a bit more specific. Your total addressable audience for that piece of content is smaller than most top of funnel content, but it's more targeted, it's more relevant. So here's an example from Patty, co-founder of Dex. It's a software in the HR category. And this post goes over a trick that he uses to spot top performers by looking at their CV. So nowhere in this post does he mention Dex itself as the product. There's no hard CTA to book a demo now or sign up or buy, but it's establishing him as a leader in the HR category, which is relevant to Dex. So by establishing himself as a leader in that category of content, if someone needs a software tool in the HR tech category, Patty's going to be considered because he's establishing himself as a thought leader. And this is a style of content that can be effective for doing that. But again, notice how there's no hard pitch or hard CTA. You don't want to be overly salesy. Not every post needs a call to action, and every post definitely doesn't need a direct link to your site. Like, I know a lot of founders will try to use UTM links in every single post to track web traffic driven by LinkedIn. That's just not how it works. People usually don't see a single post and then click to your site and then buy now. They see post after post after post after post. And then eventually when they have a conversation where they realize they need a tool in your category, they don't even go via your LinkedIn. They go direct and book a call, but that's because they've been seeing your content for months. And middle of funnel content is great for establishing you as that thought leader. And then of course we have bottom of funnel content. This is pretty straightforward. This is all your salesy stuff. So your case studies, your product launches, all the stuff that has a more direct pitch. And it does have a hard CTA. And the way I've been talking, you might think that you should never pitch your product at all. You should never mention it, never give a CTA. That's not true. A lot of founders just go too hard in that direction and just pitch too often. But ultimately, our goal with LinkedIn is to generate leads. I'm not trying to make you an influencer. I'm trying to get you customers. And you do that in part by telling your audience about your product, showing social proof via case studies and testimonials. Like this example from Nathan right here is a good example of a post that gives good social proof. There's no crazy narrative. There's no super polarizing hook. It's just a simple screenshot of a Slack message from a happy customer. And it actually got pretty good engagement. My expectation for most bottom of funnel content is that it's not going to get as much engagement as a top of funnel post or a middle of funnel post, unless your product is just so inherently viral. For example, about a year or so ago, Cognition Labs announced Devin as an AI agent for coding. And there was this idea that, oh my gosh, engineers are so screwed, it's going to take their job. And it was just such a compelling product and a polarizing product that bottom of funnel content went mega viral. Most products aren't like that. So when you're posting a case study or testimonial, when you're posting a product demo, don't expect virality. You want to get virality and visibility from those other content types, and then use bottom of funnel content to convert that audience. And also you want it to be on your page, because when you get people to your page using top of funnel content and middle of funnel content, those bottom of funnel posts are still there. So I mentioned that your corporate page kind of functions like a landing page. Your personal page does that to some degree too. And what can happen is someone comes in through a more top of funnel post, but they're in your target audience. They start scrolling through your content that already exists, and they're seeing the customer screenshots. They're seeing the case studies. They're seeing the interesting product feature that you launched that's actually very relevant to them. So it all works together, and you can see how making sure you have the appropriate balance across your content funnel can make sure you're set up to get more visibility, get more followers, impressions, and you're able to convert that visibility into actual demand. As far as the split here, I'd recommend about 20% top of funnel, 60% middle of funnel, and 20% bottom of funnel. Very rough recommendations. It's going to depend on the client. Again, there might be some overlap between what is top of funnel and middle of funnel for you depending on your category. But in most cases, 20, 60, 20 is a good split. And that leads me to my next topic here, which is cadence. So how often should you post? What does the ideal cadence look like on LinkedIn? And There are a few different levels to this. There are 3 distinct levels that I like to break out here. Level 1 is you're just getting started. You've never posted before. You're dipping your toes in the water. I'd recommend starting at 3 times per week. 1 time per week, 2 times per week is better than nothing, but it's just not enough. If you're using LinkedIn as a marketing channel, you're only posting 1 time per week, you're just not getting enough reps in. You're not getting enough exposure to your audience. And also, if you're writing your own content and trying to get better, only practicing 1 time per week is not a great way to improve that skill. Whereas if you're writing 3 different posts per week, you get 3 different opportunities to test, 3 different opportunities to sit down and write and practice your hooks and practice your formatting, practice your narrative, practice your media selection, all these different things that go into making you proficient at LinkedIn. So start with 3 times per week as level 1 if you're just getting started. If you're feeling pretty comfortable and you have the time and ability to do so, level 2 is 5 times per week. This is where I recommend most founders hang out. This is the ideal cadence where you strike a good balance between posting often, but not overwhelming yourself. So 5 times per week, Monday through Friday is typically what I'd recommend. Weekends can be hit or miss if you want to do one of those 5 posts on a Saturday or Sunday. Not the end of the world. And I've actually had some posts perform very well on Saturdays and Sundays. Now, if you're very comfortable with writing content, or you're just seeing very outsized success on LinkedIn, you want to double down, triple down, you can go to level 3, which is 7 times per week, daily, every single day. I'll fluctuate between level 2 and 3. Again, level 2 is enough to see a lot of financial upside from LinkedIn. But again, if you want to triple down, or you just want to practice writing more and you really enjoy that process, then go up to 7 times per week. I wouldn't go twice per day. You can. I've seen people do it. In most cases, you'll only be able to sustain that for a week or 2 at a time before you start running out of ideas or your meeting schedule gets busier again. You just don't have time to write content. And there is a point of diminishing returns. So for most founders, start at level 2. If you're feeling a little bit apprehensive, you don't feel confident in your writing ability, start at level 1. If you're killing it and you see a lot of success on LinkedIn, you want to double down, go to level 3. But in most cases, level 2 is good enough. And real quick, if you're enjoying this video and getting value out of it and you want an even deeper dive on how to create LinkedIn content that grows your audience and gets you leads, I produce a newsletter every single week that I send to 10,000 marketers and founders that gives my best insights and learnings from posting over 150 pieces of content per week across our clients. So if you want an inside look at everything that I'm seeing from our clients and my own content, I share that all in my newsletter. It's free. I'll drop it in the description below and would love to see you in there. This third part of content strategy is arguably the most important. All this is important, but if there's one thing you could do to make your life easier when you sit down to write content, or if you're working with an agency like Compound to produce your content, when you show up to the content interviews and you're actually talking about the stories and material you're going to use, you need a system for idea generation. And there are a few different specific tactics I like to include here. Number 1 is incredibly simple. Just have a space in your notes app. So for me, it's Apple Notes that you just abuse. Pin it to the top so it's easy to access. And anytime you have an idea for content, you see something you like, you have an interesting conversation, anything that could be a fragment of an idea for a LinkedIn content piece, drop it in that note. The entire goal here is that you never, ever start from a blank page. Every time you sit down to write LinkedIn content, you can always pull up that notes tab and you have fragments of ideas to pull from. The reason why content can feel so overwhelming is because founders can feel like they have to sit down every single day and come up with this amazing idea from scratch. If you're doing it right, you really shouldn't have to. And on top of the Notes app, I'd recommend just screenshotting any post that you find compelling. If you see any photos you like or graphics or videos, screenshot them, save them. Again, the goal here is to give yourself material to reference when you sit down to write content, when you're thinking about your content strategy. You never want to start from a blank page. So again, just like you're abusing your Notes app, abuse your screenshots. And last thing here for idea generation is to keep a running document. I like having the Notes app on my phone, but I do think there's something to be said for having a Google Doc or a Notion database, whatever your preference is, where you type out your ideas for content and just keep that running list. Update it once a week. So with all this stuff, the Notes app, screenshots and bookmarks, the Google Doc or whatever you use there, 1 day or time per week, sit down for half an hour and organize your ideas. So that way, when you sit down to write, you're not just staring at this blank page, terrified, unsure of what to write about. That feeling sucks. And if that's how you're feeling every time you try to write LinkedIn content, of course you're not going to be consistent. That's terrible. So these tactics of saving and organizing ideas helps to combat that. This next component of LinkedIn content strategy will make your content workflow so much more effective. The content will perform better, and it'll likely be easier for you to stay consistent over the long haul. And it's using repeatable formats. And there's some carryover between what we were just talking about with idea generation and formats, because again, a lot of times founders will sit down and have no idea what they're going to post. They're starting completely from scratch, and the idea generation tactics like the Notes app, screenshots, running Google Doc help to solve for idea generation. But how do you package those ideas in a compelling way for LinkedIn? Even if you have the idea, going from that to a finished post that's actually going to be set up to do well can still be quite overwhelming, and we can solve for that and make that easier by leaning on repeatable formats. So I want to give you a few examples of formats that you could use that I found to work well for me and just consistently hit pretty well over time. So as you can see in this example on screen right now, I start off in this hook with some social proof, talking about how many applications I've reviewed and just giving a sense of legitimacy of saying, okay, I've reviewed a ton of applications. Here are the trends I've seen and observations I've seen from the CEO's perspective. And then I go into a listicle here. And ideally, each of these items in your listicle can stand alone on their own post. So if I wanted to, I could take this point here about using AI in the application process and probably expand on that into its own piece of content, or even just copy paste this section alone into a short form post. It's compelling enough to stand on its own. So if you start off with that social proof that's relevant to people that you're trying to attract. So in this case, I'm trying to speak to writers and help them understand, hey, you're looking for a job. I've hired a bunch of writers. I've reviewed tons and tons of applications. Here's what I look for. So here's why you should trust me. And then here are these valuable pieces of the listicle that they can actually go and apply to their own hiring process. And then I end with the CTA to apply for the writer position. So you can see how that works. And I can just run this format again and again and again and again. And to prove this point for you, here's another example of a social proof plus listicle format that I used. So I start off with saying I spent the past 5 years posting on LinkedIn. It's this channel responsible for compound scaling to 7 figures in revenue. So I've built my agency to 7 figures in revenue using LinkedIn content. That gives social proof for someone who's looking to use LinkedIn content to grow their business. Oh, you should trust Tommy. And then I get into each of these items in the listicle. And again, each item can stand on its own as its own piece of content. And just by layering these in, it becomes a very valuable piece of content for the reader. So my point here is if I'm ever stuck or I have this idea of I don't know how I'm going to format it, I can always just fall back on this idea of have some social proof in the hook and then get into a listicle. And that's just kind of an old faithful thing that I can do. Another easy format that works for a lot of founders, this is more of a top of funnel one, but if you're selling into other founders, this can also be good middle of funnel content. It's the monthly update. So with most of our clients, every single month, we will do a monthly update, sharing some wins and learnings from the past month. Ideally, we can share some sort of growth metric in the hook. So the example from Austin here, July was a record month for Unify. We closed more than $1 million in ARR and booked 885 meetings and $25 million in new pipeline. So specific metrics that are compelling and show the growth of the company. And then getting into a quick listicle of the wins and lessons from that month. So Austin shares 3 simple ones in this post. One common way I like to do this is, again, just growth metric in the hook and then listicle of 3 to 5 wins and learnings from the past month. Ideally include some sort of in real life photo. So this is from the office. You can include a team picture, an offsite picture, something from an event, even a selfie. If you got nothing else, that's fine. I'm not a huge fan of using the selfies on LinkedIn, but it can work. An example of a repeatable format that we can just run month after month after month, and it just continues to work. Those are 2 easy repeatable formats that you could use today. And if I had to pick one, just fall back on over and over and over again, it's the listicle one. It's just so easy to adapt, and you can use it with pretty much any topic, any industry, any category. Ideally, you want to have some sort of hot take or social proof metric in the hook, and then again, go into the listicle. Now, let's move on to analytics. To be completely honest with you, analytics aren't that complex. I think a lot of people massively overcomplicate this. Your analytics on LinkedIn that you're going to look at are going to be pretty much the same as any other social platform. Impressions, follower growth, engagement on each piece of content. Those are more leading indicators. And of course, at the end of the day, most of you watching this video are going to want to get leads. So how many leads are coming in through LinkedIn? And the best way that I recommend to measure this is use self-reported attribution. So if you're taking a sales call with someone, taking a demo, just ask them how they heard about you. You can also include this on your lead qualification form, just asking them what channel they found your company through. It's not going to be perfect. There might be examples where someone says LinkedIn, but they actually converted through another channel, or what happens more often is they say that they converted through a cold email or they came in via SEO, but they saw your content for months and months and months on LinkedIn and on social, but they didn't actually convert through there. So it's not always perfect, but if you're doing LinkedIn content well, you will see over time the amount of people that say, hey, I saw your founder's LinkedIn content, or I found you guys through LinkedIn, is going to trend up over time. And back to the social media analytics, so the impressions, follower growth, again, not overly complex. You don't need to overthink this. Those should go up over time. There are some platform fluctuations. So for example, organic impressions actually have been going down a bit on LinkedIn over the past several months. So I have seen that dip on my own content across clients. We're seeing a bit of a resurgence now over the past month or two, but the first part of 2025 was definitely a decrease in organic impressions. And there's only so much you can do about that. So don't over stress if you see a platform wide trend. This is where talking to other founders who are also posting can be quite helpful, because it can help give you an understanding of whether or not it's just you and your hooks suck, or your formatting is not good, the topics you're picking aren't compelling, or if it's a platform wide trend. The good thing is with those analytics, even with that dip in impressions, we weren't really seeing a decrease in business outcomes, so those leads generated. So that's why you want to keep track of all of this. And then when you're looking at iterating on content, so determining what to do more of, what to do less of, there's a few different categories that I'd recommend looking at. And I'm gonna break it down into 3 specific ways to iterate your content for you. The first area is gonna be hook iteration. Usually if your content is not performing as well as it should be, you're not generating leads, your impressions are dipping or plateauing, you're just struggling to grow. Almost always, your hooks are not where they need to be. A lot of times I talk to founders who have been posting for some time and they're complaining they're not seeing momentum. And I look at their content and their hooks are just boring. They're not using any hook levers. So within hooks, there are different levers that you could use to make them more compelling. For example, using specific numbers, ideally monetary figures, that can work really well. A narrative hook, so framing something as a story versus a generic how-to piece of content. Listicles, as I mentioned a few times throughout this video, are one of the best ways to make your hooks more compelling. Trend jacking, so using a popular piece of news in your category in the hook to get people's attention. Credibility jacking, which is kind of related to trend jacking, where you use a popular name of a company or a person in your category to get attention. My point is there are a lot of different things that you could do in your hooks. I have a lot of videos on my channel that go through different strategies for improving your hooks. But if your content is not doing as well, I would start there. The second area that is primed for iteration is media. This is where you see a lot of variance over the months when you're posting on LinkedIn. For example, back in Q4 2024, short form video was crushing. There was a massive pump in the amount of impressions short form video content was getting. But now short form video content is actually one of the worst performing pieces of content on LinkedIn. So you want to keep an eye on what media type is doing best between text only, text plus an IRL photo, text plus a branded graphic, short form vertical video, short form horizontal video, long form video. Sometimes I'll take these YouTube videos and post them directly to LinkedIn, and that can work quite well. And you'll want to keep an eye on what media format is performing best for you. From my observation, looking at over 150 assets going live every single week across our clients, right now we're seeing IRL photos, so just regular photos like team pictures, even selfies, pictures from offsites, pictures from events, just photos taken with an iPhone or a camera, not a branded graphic, but IRL photos. Those are performing best. Text only is also seeing a bit of a comeback. So I am seeing text only posts do quite well. And that was not the case just a few months ago. Towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, text only content was not doing very well. So that's my point on, like, you need to be monitoring different media performance. And the third way you want to iterate is by paying attention to outsized performance and just repurposing winners. So if you have a media format do well, if you have a post format do well, if you have a hook do well, if you have a specific story that resonates with your audience, reuse those. So many times founders are terrified to repeat themselves. This is one of the areas I have to coach most of our clients on pretty often, is when you have a winning piece of content, your audience shows you that they like this content. They want to see more of it. What you don't want to do is say, oh, I'm not going to post about that for the next 6 months because I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to annoy my audience. Your audience isn't going to be annoyed. They're telling you what they want. So if you're seeing that outsized performance on a specific story, so for example, a lot of our clients see origin story posts perform very well. So if that's the case, we'll start off with that in almost every case. And then we can reuse that, say, a quarter later, when they've built their audience in town, there's a bunch of new people in their door, and a lot of their current audience kind of forgets that they post about that origin story in the first place, because 3 months is a lot of time on LinkedIn and on social media in general. So if we already have evidence that that content does well, let's go ahead and repurpose that. And you can either slightly tweak the hook and then use the same body. You can just kind of rewrite the post, but use the same story so it's different. Or if you're feeling it, you can just repost the copy verbatim and post the exact same thing. I've done that plenty of times. If you look through my content for long enough, you can probably tell, but that is definitely a viable strategy. And I'd recommend repurposing your winners because you put in all this effort to find a winner. Finding winning content is hard. It's not as easy as you might think. So when you find a post that really crushes or an angle that really crushes, you want to run that into the ground almost and just use it and use it and use it and use it until it stops working. Now, I got to be clear about something. Just posting good content is not enough to win on LinkedIn. It will get you a lot of the way there, but you're missing out on a lot of potential revenue, potential LinkedIn growth if you're not doing outbound engagement. You're not going and finding posts to comment on. You're not doing connection requests. You're not actively looking at your profile viewers and seeing if relevant people are coming into your profile. Outbound engagement is often the missing link between good content that's performing well and good content that's performing well and generates revenue. That bridge is the outbound engagement. So there are a few different components to this. One is outbound comments. So every day I'd recommend spending some time leaving thoughtful comment on other piece of content. And there are two types of accounts that you'll want to comment on. One, obviously, ICP accounts. So accounts of people who could be customers of your product. If they're posting on LinkedIn, they're active, obviously you want to go drop comments on their content. So they're seeing you more and more and more. The key, again, is to not use AI to do this. Don't leave generic comments like great post or great stuff. Leave thoughtful comments that show that you actually read the content and synthesize your thoughts and gave a response. The second type of account that I'd recommend commenting on are ICP influencer accounts. So not customer accounts, but accounts that customer accounts also follow. So other thought leaders in your category. And there are a couple of reasons for this. So one, their comment section, your audience, your target audience is going to be reading those comments. So your comments in that comment section, I've said comments a lot in the past few seconds, but you know what I mean, serve as a billboard for your profile. So your ideal customer is going to be in that comment section and see your content. And if you do leave a thoughtful comment, it's not AI generated, it's not super generic, they might click into your profile and follow you, especially if you've been posting content actively for the past few weeks, past few months, and they actually like it, they might follow you. Now you're in their timeline as well. The other benefit here that I don't hear as many people talk about is oftentimes when you engage with influencers in your category in a genuine way, they'll reciprocate. So they'll start engaging on your content, commenting, liking it. And when they do that, your content gets amplified to their audience. You can tap into that audience of the influencer by creating that reciprocal engagement. You don't want to make this formal via an engagement pod. Those are dumb. Don't do that. But what often happens is when you do this organically, people will start to reciprocate that engagement and it helps your account pick up traction. Along with comments, you'll want to send outbound connection requests. And this is especially helpful for target audiences that aren't as active with posting on LinkedIn. So a lot of times you'll be selling to people who aren't trying to be LinkedIn content creators. If you're selling to marketing tech or go-to-market tech, you kind of have the luxury of your target customer being hyper active on LinkedIn. But if you're selling into insurance brokers or developers or people who aren't as active posting on LinkedIn, you still want to get in front of them. And they're going to be on the platform, but they're lurking. They're not posting. They're not really engaging a whole lot. And how you get in front of these people is by sending them connection requests. Because when they accept that connection request, it's a mutual follow. So by accepting your connection request, they're going to start seeing your content more and more. And that's how you get into their feed. And this is especially helpful for new founders who are posting on LinkedIn for the first time. So when founders first start posting, they don't have a built-in audience already. You say you're starting with 50 followers, 50 connections that you knew from high school or something. The way that you can solve for the cold start problem that a lot of founders will face on LinkedIn is by sending these connection requests. Because again, you'll get that mutual follow and you'll start to manually build this audience of relevant people over time, instead of just relying on the algorithm and hoping that it serves your content to the right people. I'd recommend sending 20 connection requests per day. Don't go excessively above this. There is an upper limit on how many you can send. I also would not recommend using automation tools for this. LinkedIn's pretty particular about automations and will crack down on you if you use them. So just be careful. I know people have used them successfully. There are products that are good for this. Use them at your own risk. My general take on this is just do it manually. All you got to do is send 20 connection requests per day. That should take you maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. If you do that along with the comments and the content strategy we talked about earlier in this video, you'll be in a fantastic place to take advantage of LinkedIn and actually book leads and book revenue from it. The last hack I'll give you here on engagement is look at your profile viewers. LinkedIn actually tells you who looks at your profile. So if I go to my profile here, I can actually go to the profile views and see exactly who's looked at my profile. There's no other social media platform that lets you know this information. So this is very helpful, especially if you're doing any sort of outbound found people who look at your profile who are in your ICP are prime candidates for sending an outbound message to them or sending a cold email to them. And if you're nailing the content strategy, you're doing the outbound engagement, you're doing all this stuff for a long enough time, you're going to start to get more people to your profile. So obviously you want to make sure your profile is set up in a way that converts all that traffic into followers and eventually customers. And there's a few different ways you want to do this on your LinkedIn profile. I like to recommend treating your LinkedIn profile like a landing page. So how can you optimize the conversion rate of traffic to followers and again, eventually customers? So a few simple things you want to do to make this happen. Number one, your profile picture, make it clear, shoulder up, just a simple headshot. Don't do a selfie, don't do anything weird. Just keep it simple and clean. Your header doesn't matter a whole lot. I've had this one for years and I haven't changed it. It doesn't really make a difference, but you can have one of those branded ones if you'd like. I don't find it makes that much of a difference. Someone might disagree with me. Do with that what you want. You want to make sure your headline is dialed in. Typically the format I'd recommend is role at company and then a one line about the value prop that your profile offers. So going back to that golden question we talked about earlier, how does your profile deliver on that value? So for me, CEO at Compound, co-founder of Bluecast, my two roles, and then building a social media agency for B2B companies. So very clearly, if you want to use social and LinkedIn to build your B2B company, you're going to follow me on LinkedIn. Don't overthink your about section. I see a lot of founders write an entire novel in this. You don't need to. Just keep it short and sweet. Make it clear what you do, who you do it for. Ideally have some sort of social proof. So in this, I say we've helped 50 plus early stage SaaS and service founders launch and scale founder-led content in the past 1.5 years. I'm actually due to update that because it's been 2.5 years and we've helped over 100 people. But you know what I mean. And then once you've got that dialed in, go down to the featured links. This is one thing I really like about LinkedIn is that you can make it very obvious what you want that next step in the funnel to be. And with these featured links, I usually recommend a few different setups. Number one, only have 1 to 2 featured links. You don't want to have 5 to 7. That's too overwhelming. That's like when you go to a fast food restaurant and there's a million different items on the menu, you get confused, overwhelmed, and you might walk out and not order anything. You want to avoid that with your featured links here. You want to have one of them be the obvious next step in your funnel. So for me, that's my newsletter. And then you want the other one to be some sort of case study or social proof. I actually broke my own rule here. I have 2 CTAs, so my newsletter and then my software company. But a lot of times what I recommend for our founder clients is CTA and then some sort of case study. So if you've posted a case study on LinkedIn, I would make that one of the featured posts on your profile. So that way people see work that you've done for people and you have some social proof. And then if they're interested, they can take that next obvious step in your funnel. I'd also recommend making sure you have this custom button set up. So if I go to one of my posts here, you see I have this view my newsletter button set up next to my profile. So this actually shows up in feed, which is great. People don't actually have to click into your profile to see this. And I have that go over to my social files newsletter, which by the way, I send every week, Monday. Gives you pretty much everything you need to know to grow on social and generate leads. If you want to check that out, I'll drop that link in the description. I think over 10,000 people read it, which is pretty impressive. So if you want to be one of those people and get more marketing insights, check that out. But that button goes directly to my newsletter. To set that up, all you want to do is go to edit, go down here, premium custom button. You do need LinkedIn Premium. I'd recommend just getting it. It's worth the price if you're taking LinkedIn seriously. And then edit custom button. I have view my newsletter. If you're sending people to a book a demo page, I just have view my website and then the URL here, and then click done, and you have that button on your profile. And if you nail all those things, your profile is pretty much set up like a landing page so that when you're nailing the content, you're doing all these outbound engagements, you're going to get a bunch of traffic to your site, and now you're going to be set up to convert that traffic into followers so they start seeing your content again and again and again and again, and eventually when they need a product in your category, who's going to be top of mind? You are. Now, click on this video here where I go over something I only touched on a little bit in this video, but it's hands down one of the most important things to understand about LinkedIn, the algorithm. You'll see me break down some of the biggest myths you might have heard about it so you know what to avoid. And then I'll dive into exactly how to create content on LinkedIn that'll force the algorithm to show your content to more potential customers so you can consistently grow on LinkedIn and get more leads. I'll see you over there.